And our first speaker giving a keynote address is Yves-Marie Bozek. So over to you, Yves-Marie.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining today. So in the spirit of sharing stories, I grew up in France, on the west coast, and so pretty far from coral reefs. And my first experience on coral reef was in Egypt, in the Red Sea, and that was completely incredible. I was a student in marine ecology and oceanography, and I think I knew what was my path since then. And now I'm here today to talk about the future of the Great Barrier Reef. So I'm pretty proud to be here. What I'm going to show you today is the very last projections of the modeling and decision support team of the ARAP program. And I'd like to acknowledge all those people who have contributed to this work and thank them. So the big question we are trying to tackle here is what's the future of coral reefs, and I guess that's a question that many people can relate to, and especially because we've got very important concerns as everybody knows. First, like the effect of climate change that is accelerating and putting even more pressure on coral reefs worldwide, and also like this uncertainty around how corals are going to adapt. Can they adapt? How fast can they adapt to this rate of warming? So to do this, we need to project reefs into the future. And for that, what we need is predictive models. So I like to talk about predictive models. That's going to be my talk. But I just want to say, we know there's a lot of uncertainties around models. They are not perfect. They are not crystal balls. They not predict the future. What they give us is a range of possible scenarios for the future. And then they can be very, very useful because using those different projections, we can help better understand what are the impacts of climate change and try to assess them. And they're also very useful for educate people, the public, but also decision makers. And perhaps more importantly, they can also inform management and conservation. So this is what we are doing within the modeling and decision support group, and specifically in this subprogram of the subprogram, which is the counterfactual modeling. And the objective of the counterfactual modeling is really to make those projections, providing long-term forecast for the GBR. And that requires considering different warming scenarios. We do this to inform about future trends, but also uncertainties around those trends. And the second objective is to use these projections as a baseline to assess interventions. And typically what we will do is to simulate interventions, and to assess those benefits, we need to actually subtract the intervention by the counterfactual. One very important component, I guess, of the MNDS is to ensure that projections are credible, and that requires state-of-the-art ecosystem models, but also being able to understand the limitations of the climate models and what kind of scenario they provide to us, and being able to have a rationale around how do we actually pick climate models to project coral cover into the future. So what we have been doing, and in the MNDS, there are a range of different models. And here I'm going to be talking about Reef Mod GBR. And this model is taking probably one of the best current knowledge we've got on corals, the ecology of corals, but also the evolution and the environment of the GBR. And also taking the very last projections of the climate by climate models. And the objective here is to provide trying to provide likely futures for the GBR and having a criticized approach to those projections. That was the wrong button. Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of Reef Mod GBR here. The model is individual based, so that means we are simulating individual coral colonies on a virtual space, and that space represents, this is a grid, and we design one grid for every single individual reef of the GBR, and we've got more than 3,800 of those. The model is multi-taxa, and we consider 6 taxonomic groups. There are 3 acroporids groups, one group for posterioporids, one group of large massive, and another group for catching all the rest, basically. The model is mechanistic, and we are simulating the core processes that drive the demographics of corals at different life stage. The model is also spatially realistic and at different scales. So the first scale on the grid is really accounting for spatial interactions between colonies. At the scale of a grid, we are dealing with demographic processes, recruitment, mortality, and also we are simulating the dynamics of COTS population, acanthaceae population. At the scale of individual reef, we are capturing the effect of the environment at between 1 kilometer or 4 kilometer scale, and that includes exposure to cyclones, exposure to heat stress in the form of the heating wicks. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the heating wicks today. And it's just a very simple measure, a very common measure to measure heat stress, and has been related to coral mortality pretty well. So it's a good predictor for models for bleaching. Water quality, which is provided by e-reefs, and this is mostly the effect of suspended sediment. And we also simulate at the reef level cost control. Finally, at the scale of the entire GBR, so more than 3,800 reefs, we simulate the metapopulation dynamics of corals and cods thanks to a larval dispersal that connects all those individual reefs. So I'm going to explain here how the model simulates bleaching and heat tolerance. So we can navigate this graph. It's a bit complicated, but maybe we just start with the gray line, which represents the average response of a taxonomic group. And here I'm dealing with acroporid corals. And on the x-axis, we've got the heating wicks. That's the measure of cumulative heat stress. On the y-axis, we've got the probability of mortality. And then we've got this curve that is derived from empirical observation from the GBR, where, of course, mortality increases with heat stress. And what we do is, that's a very important step for modeling adaptation, is to implement a viability of heat tolerance among individuals of the same group. And the way we do is simply shifting this curve left or right, so towards increasing the heating wicks for the same mortality or decreasing. And this is represented by those the little gray spots. So then the next step is to actually simulate the transmission of those heat tolerance phenotypes across multiple generations. And this is the key of the model of adaptation we're using here, which is essentially a process of adaptation through selection. So we just start with the distribution of heat tolerance values for a group. And here, heat tolerance values can be between essentially -8 and +8 heating wicks. And heat tolerance value of 0 means that the coral colony is at the mean of the group. So basically on the green curve. When you've got bleaching, bleaching operates like a selection pressure and tend to filter out the heat tolerance, and then shift the distribution to the right towards higher values of heat tolerance. And then at the next generation, we generate heat tolerance based on this distribution and based on a parameter that is called heritability, which is a very common parameter used for selective breeding. So there are two basic, very important parameters for modeling adaptation here: heritability, that we use 0.3, and a maximum of heat tolerance. We have to bound the interval of the range of heat tolerance. If we don't do that, just with a simple action of bleaching, we'll just push this distribution towards an infinite value of heat tolerance. And those values are derived from experimental data from Palo, from only one species. All right, so how the output looks like. So the first thing we do is to run a reconstruction of the recent history of the GBR, so between 2008 and 2023. And for this, we use observed DHW, the rating width from NOAA, and reconstructed cyclones, and we use e-reefs for water quality. And this is a very important process. We do this every time we run a forecast, a projection, as a first step. And it is to ensure that the model is well aligned with observations. So here the observations are the dots. They are the LTMP data from AIMS. The blue lines represent the trajectory of an individual reef. When I say trajectory, is the total coral cover, the viability of total coral cover over time. So we've got more than 3,800 blue lines here. And the red line is just the average. So it's the mean coral cover of the GBR, of the Great Barrier Reef. So now, to project coral reefs into the future, we need climate change scenarios. And for this, we use 10 climate models. And they are models coming from the last generation of models used by the last report of the IPCC. What's important to know is like climate model come with a very coarse resolution of data. So what we are using is essentially daily data of temperature from today until the end of the century. And this data is a very coarse resolution between 100 and 150K. So the first step is to downscale this data, and we use here an approach of mechanistic downscaling that takes the local physics of the reef to interpolate. To derive temperature at this scale. So we've got local temperature at 10 kilometer scale, and then the next step is from this daily temperature data downscale at 10 kilometer is to estimate the rating weeks with the common algorithm of the rating weeks. And finally, we interpolate these values at the reef level. So for every single reef, we've got a chronology of the rating weeks from today to the future, to the end of century. Each model comes with different scenarios of climate change, and we're considering here 5 scenarios. So they are called shared socio-economic pathways, and then they represent some expectations about the future of the carbon economy. They come with very different expectation of warming by the end of the century, and you can see this, plus 1.5, plus 2, 3, 4, or 5. And those scenarios have different likelihood, and people tend to actually agree that the most likely scenario today is the one that is called middle of the road, and that which assumes that there's going to be a warming below plus 3 degrees by the end of the century. So I'm going to be mostly describing this scenario. I'm going to show you projections for the 5 scenarios, but I will mostly develop this particular one. Just one further step is like with each climate model, we come with only one projection. So in order to create a bit of variability between projections, what we do is reshuffling each chronology within a decade. In order to create, for each model, we are creating 20 new chronologies of the rating weeks. So we've got more stochasticity in our predictions of bleaching. So from 10 futures, we actually derive 200 futures that we can use to project coral cover. And the very last thing we take care of is like we need to realize that not all those models have the same probability, are not equiprobable. People have been describing and useful metrics for comparing this model is the climate sensitivity, which really measure how sensitive those climate models are to those processes of warming. And models with high values of climate sensitivities tend to actually predict warmer future than others. And those apparently are less likely. So this curve represents the density of probability associated to different values of the climate sensitivity. And we are using this probability density to resample our set of 200 runs based on this relative likelihood. So we can to give preference to climate models that have greater likelihood than others. Here I'm just showing one sample forecast. This is one run using only one climate model for one warming scenario, which is 4.5. What? Wow, okay, so I'm not going to show that. I'm going to go directly to the results of the predictions for all the warming scenarios. So first, I'm showing the category of decreasing weeks that will be that are projected to occur on the reef. Here are the simulations showing the mean coral cover for the entire GBR, and there are 200 of those, right? And you can see there is a great variability among climate models. And here, this is after resampling within this set of runs according to the likelihood of those climate models. And we represent this as a distribution for every year of the mean coral cover of the Great Barrier Reef. And those boxes, the boxes cover 50% of the data, and the central mark represents the median. As you can see, under this scenario 1.9, which is the most optimistic one, we start losing coral cover early on until the 2040, before there is a kind of a rebound, and we think this is due to the fact that corals tend to adapt and can recover from this warming. Here I'm representing the average coral cover in the past 15 years as a reference. So you can see that with this scenario, we can maintain coral cover into the future with the same at the same level, basically. 2.6, which is still quite optimistic. We've got a bit more bleaching, a bit more viability among multiple runs, but pretty much there's a good outlook. Like, even though we lose corals in the first 10, 20 years, coral tends to rebound after that, probably due to the potential of adaptation. So the most likely scenario is 4.5, and as you can see here, there's a big difference in the intensity of bleaching occurring over the century, and that really gives a different outlook where coral cover basically declines strongly and with no scope for recovery. I'm not going to detail the other scenarios because they are less likely, and it's just getting worse and worse. So I think it's a bit depressing. I'm just going to focus here on the most likely scenario, 4.5, so 3-degree warming by the end of the century, just to show you that all species are actually affected by bleaching. Here I'm representing on the left the more heat sensitive, so the acroporids and postroporids, and on the right the most tolerant ones. But even the more tolerant ones tend to decrease over time, which will be different under 2-degree warming. And especially the first group, the heat-sensitive corals, which also are the fastest growing corals. You can see really like this rebound is really due to the potential to grow after disturbances when they get adapted. We can look at the density of coral juveniles, and under 3-degree warming, we can see that basically there is a constant decline of coral juveniles, which reduce the scope of recovery. But interestingly, if you look at the 2-degree warming, there's a kind of sustained ability to recover with density of juveniles that's not changing much over time. If we look at the individual reef scale, there is great variability of the responses, and this variability basically reflects thermal refugia across the GBR. But what's important is with this most likely scenario of 3-degree warming, these thermal refugia tend to vanish over time, so that by the end of the century, there is no real thermal refugia anymore, which won't be the case under 2-degree warming. Of course, there are some limitations of the model, especially with the model of adaptation, because it's not a model of adaptation based on explicit genetics. There are processes we are not considering here, like mutation, acclimatization. There's only one trait under selection, which is probably an oversimplification. If there were multiple traits, that would provide a different rate of adaptation. Heat tolerance is informed by only one species, which is a big limitation, and probably the most important parameter, the critical one, is the maximum heat tolerance that we put as a limit. Just to show you very, very quickly here, is for those two scenarios, how actually heat tolerance evolves over time. And you can see that they tend to plateau. The average is around 6, but you can, at the reef level, you can go up to 8. But with a higher maximum heat tolerance, it's very likely that we will get higher adaptation potential. So this parameter is absolutely critical, and we don't know much about it. And also, we're not considering other impacts such as ocean acidification. So in summary, just to finish, assuming 3-degree warming is the most likely scenario, there is an escalation of heat stress, more severe, more intense, and a generalized decline of coral cover. And this is because basically warming, the rate of warming exceeds the potential of adaptation. The thermal refugia just vanish, and all coral disappear. Not disappear, but decrease strongly, and there is very, very limited capacity to recover. Under 2-degree warming, which is getting less and less likely, we're losing this opportunity. But there's great difference, right? The reef keeps being resilient and with adaptive capacity that allows it to recover. And that should be, I think, an incentive for reducing carbon emission with global actions. If not, I guess this sets kind of ambitious goals for management intervention. And I'm done. Sorry.
Thank you, Yves-Marie. We have 5 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Yves-Marie. Really, really interesting. Question on one of the ensemble slides. I think it was for SSP 3.5. But there was 2 clusters. So as you go out from kind of 2050 to 2100, there's like, seems to be like 2 clusters of results. One very low and one a little bit higher. Do you have any thoughts about what's going on there?
Well, that's the difference between climate models, essentially. Yeah. Some are more optimistic than others. Yeah. I haven't represented on the gray lines represent like the GBR mean for each climate model, and they tend to actually cluster. Like there are like 3 or 4 models that are much more optimistic than the other ones. That's what we're seeing here.
Thank you. And just a reminder for questions, if you could move to the microphone at the back. So another question? Just so the online audience can hear.
Yves, I'm trying to look for something positive in the 3-degree warming scenario. Does the southern extent of the Great Barrier Reef extend further south? And so is there anything positive about that?
This is not considered in our model. Our model stops at the southern GBR, and I guess what's further south is potential for new colonization, but for new construction of a new reef, I think we're going to have to wait for decades.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, just that I've dived off Brisbane, just to the north of Brisbane, and there is coral there. I mean, this is 10 years ago, and so I was just hoping that that might give some positive.
It's a good hope. Yeah. Hopefully it keeps going, and we start seeing a reef building from that, but it takes a long time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I wonder if you've done some hindcasting and compare your model with past past occurrence or what happened in, for example, the Great Barrier Reef, and if you've also tried to disentangle the combinations of the different stressors, like how they combine. Is that additive or synergistic? Particularly, for example, degree heating weeks plus cyclone and so on.
Yeah, so it was part of a study that we dedicated on the handcasts, where we did reconstruct the past 15 years of corals across the GBR. And we used this model to try to estimate the relative contribution of different stressors. And what we found is cyclone was still a big driver, but bleaching tend to actually being one of the most important driver in the past 15 years compared to COTS and cyclones. So it's likely to continue getting even worse than that. Yeah.
So we have time for just one more question. So I think you put your hand up first.
I think it's a very quick question. The deep valleys we see in that diagram over there, are they the cyclone impacts, or what's that?
It's actually disturbances, likely cyclones or bleaching events, and most likely cyclones, I guess, at the end of the century, yeah, because you can still see a lot of corals, and they just, that's the effect of a cyclone.
But they are stochastically allocated, so it could be
right. So this is one.
Yeah,
this is one sample. So if you use another one for the same reef, you will see a different picture, because the cyclone will occur before or after, and the same with bleaching. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eve Marie. I'm sure he'll be available for more questions at lunch to follow.